Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Adventures of Mobile Homes podcast. My name is Rachel Hernandez, aka Mobile Home Girl of adventuresofmobilehomes.com. Well, today I've got my first guest interview, something very special for y'all, special treat. My good friend, my author friend, and real estate investor. And we're going to talk about land investing. So I'm going to bring him on the show. His name is Seth, but he goes by the pen name EB Farmer. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Seth.
Hey, Rachel, what's up?
Good. Nothing much. Just been, totally busy as always. But, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about all things land investing. I want to just talk a little bit about your background and then just kind of see, your progression in terms of, what you've done in terms of your real estate investing career as far as land and also with the mobile homes on the land and all the good stuff we've talked about in the past. So
thanks for having me.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, I actually found Seth, aka EB Farmer, found his book. And I actually reviewed his book. We'll talk about it later in the interview, but I will put a link to his book, my book review, in the show notes. So let's get into it. Can you tell us a little bit about you, Seth, and your background in real estate investing?
Sure. Yeah. It's always been kind of a family business for me. So as hard as it is to admit, I have to say, I was born into it to a certain degree.
Okay.
So my family has used a subdivision, rural subdivision. In other words, buying big tracts of rural acreage.
Okay.
20 acres and up, all the way to 300 acres.
Wow.
And breaking it up and using the economy of scale, sometimes building roads. We don't build as many roads as we used to, but using the economy of scale to sell, a 1 acre lot for more than you bought that acre for when you bought the entire 200, in other words. So it's the same way any business works. You buy 100 jars of mayonnaise and you sell each one for, however much more you can get for an individual jar. And it's the same. It's the same thing we do essentially. There's a lot more to it than that, but essentially that's what it is.
Okay, great. So just remember the mayonnaise and the jars.
Yeah, or you substitute whatever widget you want to sell.
Right. Now I have a question. Have you and your family always been land investors, or have y'all done other things along the years in real estate investing?
It's almost always been land. I was, like I said, I was kind of born into it from a very young age, and I'm, in my late 30s now. So I've pretty much been at it for decades. But right. we did do some houses at some point, kind of eventually stopped doing houses as much. We used to do more major subdivisions with road building and stuff. And now we've kind of found the core, which is basically like a mini partition. So instead of building roads and stuff like that, we try to find things with existing public road frontage and, and get in and get out kind of thing, rather than being extensive developers, trying to do drainage studies and all that kind of stuff. So, we've dabbled in this and that. And we finally found something that it works and it has a good return for the amount of headache that's involved, I guess. And that's basically what we've stuck to since then. So.
Okay. Now walk us through the process, I guess, since, this is about mobile home investing, my podcast, how you've incorporated, either now or in the past, mobile homes into the land investing business. How does that work?
Sure. So, first off, my market, where I'm selling, which is just rural, deep South, I'm not going to pinpoint my location, but I operate in the rural South. And so I'd say 90% of my end users are going to be folks who are going to be placing a mobile home. I mostly sell to mobile home people. I don't particularly mess with the mobile homes myself. Again, because it's like through the iterations of doing things, I've found a particular niche that I, focus on, which is giving people places to put mobile homes.
Okay.
So, I kind of have a general sense of what goes into developing a lot for mobile homes, but I don't even really necessarily do that. Things like a house pad or driveway or a water well or a septic, all that kind of stuff has to go in, and at some points we've also done that and found that it was a lot more work for, not necessarily the right amount of reward. So these days we pretty much just stick to the raw land and we sell to mobile home buyers.
Okay, that's very interesting. So, if you're selling to mobile home buyers and you don't deal with the homes themselves, are you saying that they bring in their own homes, or you're working with the dealership with their own buyers, or how does that work in terms of the partnership with finding them?
Yeah, so I've tried to work with mobile home dealerships, and depending on the individual salesman or manager, I've had some success. But really, it is just like you said, it is just people who they're just looking for a piece of land. Maybe they already have their home picked out. I offer financing on just the land itself, but a lot of mobile home dealerships, as you probably know, do something called the land home package. At least that's what it's called here. In which, once the buyer has found me, okay, so they found an acre for 35 grand. They'll go to the mobile home dealership and ask, hey, can you wrap the land and the mobile home and the house pad and the driveway and the septic all into one big loan? The mobile home company pays me out. And then, it's great when that happens. I love it when that happens, but
that's the ideal situation.
Yeah, right. I don't have to do anything. And I just get paid cash up front, essentially. So.
Right. Are you seeing more of that at the time of this recording? Are you seeing less of that? Because I know financing is still easy to get with the single family homes, but I'm not sure in terms of the mobile home industry. Are you seeing more financing doing those land home packages and working with the dealership right now? Or is it kind of, it's different? I mean,
it's a little tough sometimes, just because, so when I end up owner financing a lot of the land, right? Which is not something like I particularly like to do, but it works out. If I didn't offer that, I feel like I wouldn't have such a robust business, because people who are, it's a lot of people who are getting started in their careers. Maybe they're a blue collar person who's just getting their, these people who are plumbers and electricians and stuff that will end up making more money than all of us in the end, but when they're in their 20s and they're, just getting started, I sell to a lot of folks like that. I sell to a lot of people who are just, sort of newly arrived in the country, like Spanish speakers and stuff, who are, who have recently immigrated. So that's kind of who my end user ends up being. And they have difficulties with getting traditional financing.
Okay.
And so some of the mobile home dealerships might not work for them, but, it ends up being a case where they are almost able to pay cash for some things, because mobile homes, as so much cheaper per square foot, right?
Right.
So
in general, depending on your area, of course.
Yeah. So it helps them get a nice place. I mean, a lot of people, they don't want to live in a little apartment in a city.
Yeah, cramped. Yes, right? Exactly.
So
exactly.
There's something I find, very American about just like, okay, here's 5 acres. I'm going to toss a mobile home out there and I'm going to make my way in this, wilderness. And
right. Exactly. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that there's a couple pieces to the puzzle, because with what I do, I invest in individual mobile homes. As of this recording, I am looking into land investing. There's only one piece, the home. And then I have the community or the park that I'm working with.
Right.
But for what you do, you have the mobile home, which the buyer brings in or the dealership helps you with. But so the first thing, if I'm hearing this correctly, Seth, you got to locate a piece of land first, correct?
Yeah. So that's
buy.
That's 90% of what I do is trying to do stuff on the acquisition side.
Right. Okay. So, and how does that work if 90 or 95% of your buyers are mobile home, people with mobile homes? How does that work locating a piece of land that, unless you have to go into zoning, that you can put a mobile home on it. Can you walk us through the process of looking for something like that? Size, location, characteristics? What do you look for, and how do you find them? What is the process in terms of locating a piece of land that a mobile home can actually, where there's demand too?
Sure. Sorry, you can probably hear my dogs barking.
Oh, no problem. We're podcasting. It happens all the time.
So this is a little bit hard for me to answer in a way that will apply equally to all your listeners, because what you kind of touched on there is like a sort of regulatory bureaucratic issue, right? Which is that a lot of zoning and stuff for example, where I am in my sort of country location in the South, I mean, there's no zoning. I mean, if you're in a town, there's zoning.
Right.
But if you're buying 100 acres in the hinterlands, in the countryside, and, some of these very rural, low population areas, there's not going to be anything like zoning.
So is it unrestricted then? There's like nothing?
Almost always. There could be some situations where I'm buying a piece that, the previous owner has restrictions on or wants to put restrictions on, which is, nothing but a negotiation point at the end of the day. You have to work it out with the person you're buying it from. But typically I don't, when I'm buying, 40 acres at the end of a dirt road or whatever, it's not going to be something that's ever been restricted in any kind of way. And all that stuff turns up in the title search. And if it were to turn up something saying no mobile homes, that would almost certainly be a deal killer. So that being said, there's a variety of different ways I use to sort of figure that out. And it's going to be different depending on where people are. I'm a big believer that the first step should always be, being sort of hyper aware of the local regulations.
Right.
I know a lot of people, and I'm sure some of your listeners invest remotely. Is that something that you do much of?
No, I'm pretty much all local. I've had opportunities to invest remotely, but my whole thing is if I'm not going to be there, I don't want it to be a headache. And then I've known people who've done it, and then it becomes a management issue, managing other people. And I just prefer to keep things simple. I'm local and I just focus. And at the time of this recording, I'm actually working with the park manager. I just did a training on how I actually protest taxes for my own mobile home investing business. And this park manager have actually helped me, but he knows a lot of landowners in the area.
Uh-huh.
So he's actually helping me to locate pieces of land potential in terms of putting mobile homes on top of that. And he has his own land, and he has family members who own land too.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring you onto the show. But there are restrictions, I'm in Texas, in the areas where I invest, but I keep everything local. So basically getting back to the piece of land that you're locating, I have a question, since it makes it easier in terms of like, if you don't have to like go through all that paperwork and bureaucracy for zoning in the areas that you invest, Seth. But my other question is, if they're rural, let's talk about marketing. How is the supply and demand? How do you find buyers? I mean, I'm sure there's mobile home dealerships, but how do you find buyers, and how do you know, before you even purchase the land, you probably are familiar with the area, that that this is a place where people want to buy. Sure. And how do you find your buyers? I
mean, it just like you said, and I feel like I'm in good company here, because I'm also an advocate of sort of starting in your own backyard, in a place where you're familiar, and you sort of know what the different values are after you do it for a certain amount of time, and what the restrictions are and what the particularly difficult situations that might arise are. So as far as finding buyers, it's generally not a problem. I always, make sure that there's certain desirable qualities, I guess you could say, like a nearby interstate, like good access to utilities. Topography is very important in my market because we have some flooding issues. So things like that, the general feel of the neighborhood, whether it's kind of a seedy looking place or whether it's, nice with cow pastures and all that kind of stuff goes into it. But as long as you are, with, especially now, we live in this like post-COVID time. And when COVID first hit, I thought I was going to be in a lot of trouble with my business, but it was actually the best period for land sales that I've ever experienced, just because.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So many people who were living in the city, maybe they were living in this big city because of the festivals and the restaurants and the concerts and all that stuff was taken away really suddenly. And they started questioning, what am I doing here? Maybe I should be on 5 acres in the country. Right.
Right.
But people don't tend to go like more than an hour, although it's getting further and further, it seems like. So I try to find something that's within an hour to, if not a big city, at least a population center. And that has easy access to it. It has good utilities, good topography, good atmosphere, all that kind of stuff. And you can sell anything, it's just some takes longer than others. Some of it flies off the shelf and some, it takes 3 or 4 months.
Right. Okay, good. That's some good information there. Regarding the piece of land that you purchased, Seth, so do you buy like a large piece of land and then divide it, or do you just buy a small piece of land, like an acre or two, and then just find a buyer? How does that work with the land that you purchase and sell?
Sure. So, it's all about the price, but the idea, I prefer, just from a personal strategy, I'm not saying this is the best way to do it.
Right.
I prefer to buy a bunch of small deals instead of one big deal. Although I end up doing both, because at the end of the day, you just buy what you can get your hands on. If it seems like a good deal, you can't always decide exactly how much you want to buy. But anyway, 20 acres would be like kind of an ideal deal for me.
Okay.
I buy 20, I sell 4 or 5s. That's kind of like the bread and butter. It varies depending on what I can find and stuff. And different counties, I work in several counties around me, and some of them let you do 7 subdivisions and some of them let you do 4, and some let you do as many as you want, as long as yada, yada, yada. So like they have different rules, and finding out what those are allows you, when you're scouting land, when you're looking at opportunities, you can see things that other people can't see, because the regulation, what can be done. And that just allows for some opportunities to present themselves, and you can create a lot of value just by subdividing, because people, you might be looking at a piece of property that's $250,000, and that shrinks the market. There's not a lot of mobile home buyers who can, get a bank loan for $250,000.
Right.
But if you sell them 5 acres for 50, then they'll be happy as a clam or whatever. So.
Right. And on the buying end, I know there's different ways to purchase them. What is your typical deal? Are you buying with cash? Are you doing owner financing with the seller? Or does depend on their situation and what they're willing to do?
Yeah, there's been moments when capital, like getting the capital together, was a real struggle. Like in the past, there's been several recessions, where we ended up cash poor, and then we did buy some land owner finance. These days, we use a lot of cash, because cash just allows you, if you can, cash
quickly,
it allows you to do things so quick. And you can, if the seller knows that you have cash, if you can just implant that into their head,
right.
You can get some really sweet deals, because who wants to wait? Okay. So like if I come to you and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can qualify for this, I'll give you $1,000 deposit. It's going to take 45 days. I got to go through the bank. There's going to be an appraisal. So if your land doesn't appraise, that's a whole nother wrench, as opposed to someone who calls and say, hey, I'll write you a check tomorrow. Let's meet at the closing table, but I want to pay 20,000 less or whatever. You can sometimes create value for yourself just by having cash. Money talks, but I'm a big proponent of also, leveraging once you get to a certain income level to where banks will pretty much loan you what you need, then, that's a good way to keep doing deals, because you can't always, especially when you owner finance to a lot of your buyers, it's hard to have the cash flow, right? If you're investing $100,000 and then people are paying you $500 a month,
right?
It takes a while. So
It does. It does. And my other question is, do you bring, or have you in the past brought in partners, or have you worked with private lenders, or is just basically you just keep everything within the family in terms of who you work with?
Yeah, we work with partners sometimes.
Okay. Okay.
I've never been very good at networking, but since I've started writing books and stuff, it's put me in contact with people like yourself.
Right.
And,
right.
So, it's worked out in a few cases, and it's great because we always have more opportunities than we have money. So sometimes you can do, that's a
good problem to have.
Right. Well, in a normal case, I'm not super ambitious and I'll do 3 or 4 deals a year, but if someone's going to bankroll another 3 or 4,
right.
Then it might as well double your business, so.
Right. Now, finding these pieces of land or tracts of land, let's talk about marketing. Do you just do the normal, just, scouting out, or do you do direct mail, or do you advertise? Do you have a website? How does that work in terms of marketing to find these sellers with land that you want to buy?
Yeah. You mean when I'm looking for land to buy?
Yeah.
It's crazy, but there's really no like system that I can explain. And I've tried to answer this question in various ways. But at the end of the day, it's a little dishonest for me to say, hey, here's a system that I use to buy land, because it's always different. And I've been in the same market for a long time, and I know almost all the players involved. And I've gotten to a point where when people have a piece of land to sell, they call me, which is a great place to be in.
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
But, for someone just starting out, there's, a lot of different ways that you can go about it. There's the MLS and realtors. There's timber companies is who we used a lot in the past. Timber companies have a ton of land.
Oh, okay.
And what's the name of the bank department? The REO. I guess there's a department.
Yeah, the REO department. Yeah, real estate owned. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Sometimes I've found good deals that way, and sometimes it's been driving down a country lane and seeing.
That's my way of doing things. Yeah, that's exactly how I'm doing it right now with that.
But how do you
manager helping me?
How do you systematize that? You can't.
Right.
So, my advice is, like, if you want it, you're going to have to just grind for it. Find out what works in your neighborhood. Keep your eyes open. Talk to everybody. Leverage your connections, which is another important part of being local. If you're local. You may have connections that maybe their grandma has a piece that's perfect or whatever. So,
right. Now, my next question is, say someone wants to start out. What would your advice be? Do they have to save up a certain amount? I would think if they're purchasing land, amount of cash, or do you suggest they bring in a partner or a private lender? How does that work for someone just starting out? Or would you suggest a certain amount of cash have cash to begin with?
I like to preface this by saying, capitalism it advantages those with capital.
Right.
So basically, you can do this starting out from nothing, but you're playing on the highest difficulty level. Like if it's a video game, you're starting out on max difficulty. Whereas if you have 100 or 150 grand in the bank that you can start with, then you're playing on easy mode. It's easy. It's easy to turn that 100 into, 225 or whatever, if you play your cards right. As far as advice, there's not really one way that I can suggest, except for if you are coming from like a world where you've had like, a paycheck and you can show good income, it might be something that, banking would be the right way to do it, because as long as you have good income and you can show that, then bankers will often play ball with you. If you're starting from scratch, it's going to be all about your hustle, and you're going to have to hustle enough to show somebody that you have value, and then that person will, take a risk and invest with you, so.
Right. Now, along the lines of banks, are you talking more like local or credit unions that you suggest, or like the big, what kind of banks, regional or?
So I always have this problem, right? Because like, I always recommend people the smallest, most local bank that they can get, except every time I find one and I spend 3 years developing a relationship with them, they get bought by freaking Cap One or something.
So it's like, what did you tell me again? Right.
So my recommendation is go small. Small credit unions, small banks, they're easier to work with. They have less. The bigger a bank gets, the more the government says, "Hey, you have to do it this way."
Right.
That's my understanding of it after speaking to bankers. I'm not a banker, so someone may correct me out there. But the bigger a bank gets, the more the sort of bureaucrats start peering over their shoulders and whatnot. But
right.
But as a small bank, they're a little more flexible. So that's always and plus you can walk in and sit down with the person who's making the decision, which is not something you'll ever get at Cap One.
Exactly. My next question is, what mistakes did you make? Because we all make them as real estate investors. I can tell you a million I've done as a mobile home investor. What mistakes did you make along the way throughout, the biggest mistakes, or any advice that you have for people, just getting started in land investing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, some mistakes I made, getting wooded pieces cut and then being left with a field full of stumps and then having to like grind the stumps. That's an expensive mistake. So I finally learned that cleared land is, significantly more valuable if you can find a field than a forest.
We've had talks about that. Yes.
Yeah.
I think I remember us talking about that. Are the costs pretty high to clear a whole, with all these trees and you can get the land cheap, but what's it going to cost to get it cleared?
Yeah. And what do people need? You have to focus on what their needs are. So you got to make sure there's at least a house site, that's out of the flood zone, that has good topography, that has good access to the road, focusing on your end users and trying to put yourself in their shoes. And something I've learned recently, and I don't know, we could talk about this a little bit, is I was always kind of against using real estate agents to sell my land because I'm a very hands-on person. I don't like to give up control. So I would use Facebook and signs and index cards and all this kind of stuff. Well, what's happened with the market in the last couple of years is gotten kind of crazy with as soon as something pops up on the MLS, it tends to get offers, at least in my market. So I started sort of engaging a few real estate agents, and now I'm spoiled, because I don't have to. If you find a good one and you can just say, hey, just go handle it. I don't want to. I don't want to have to go show it to the people and all this kind of stuff. So maybe I'm getting a little old and long in the tooth and getting spoiled, but I realized there are a couple of years, especially during the early days of the pandemic when things were really starting to take off with real estate. I should have just gotten some agents going, but I kept wanting to do it myself. And so not everything needs to be done yourself. You'll get to a certain point. If you can find the right people, don't be a control freak. I mean, when you're first getting started, I'd say do everything yourself.
Right.
But as you progress, let go a little bit.
That's very interesting. Because I'm also one of the DIY people. Yeah. And I get agents all the time who want to work with me, but it's kind of different in terms of what I do. But they want to show me land on, mobile homes on land, Yeah. And so I've been also hesitant in that route. But I mean, it's kind of interesting. Maybe I will revisit that because of the way the market is. Of course, they want to sell to someone who's going to actually take action. I'm a serious investor. I'm not a looky-loo.
That's why they're all over you, because they know. Yeah.
But I need a deal,
Yeah, right.
So it's got to work.
Right.
So that's very interesting. That's something interesting. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Now, I do have a question about the land that you purchase.
Sure.
Now, we had talked about clearing, which takes a lot of money. So you'd rather just purchase it, it's already cleared, or just minimal that needs clearing. Okay. Right. Is there a certain type of company that you work for? I mean, obviously that's not a landscaping company. Is that a specific company that clears out for land that you work with in terms of contractors? Or
usually it's just a redneck with a bulldozer, to be honest.
I've seen those videos online.
Yeah. It would be nice if there was some centralized way to do it, but really,
right.
You got to get the guy at the end of the road who's got a bulldozer, and then you got to, convince him to.
That's really very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. My other question was utilities. Okay. Say you're clearing it out. Do you even deal with utilities, or do you just leave that to the end buyer to deal with? Like if they need to put like, I don't know, a septic or like water,
Yeah.
how does that work?
I don't deal with septics, which is something that every rural piece of land needs.
Yeah, we do in Texas in the rural. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't do that, but I try to make sure that my properties have access to some sort of community water.
Okay.
When I buy the deal. If they don't, that's, I'm going to take $5,000 off the price of the lot. It doesn't have water, so you need a water well. I'm going to take $5,000 off the price. Power is, something that it pretty much exists everywhere, or it's close by. As long as you're not building roads, and as long as you're not like miles and miles away from power, it's usually a non-issue. You just call the power company, say, bring the line over to my house,
Right. So it sounds to me like you will negotiate the price, but you're going to have the buyer deal with all that. You're not going to be the one, dealing with those utilities.
Right.
Because the time is money.
It's time. And it's also like, you don't necessarily, like, say I put in a $5,000 water well. It doesn't necessarily mean that the lot's going to sell for 5,000 more. You don't, it's like, okay, you remodel your bathroom in your house, right? Your house is worth more and it will sell better because it's got a nice bathroom, but do you really get every penny back, from the bathroom? Not necessarily,
Right.
So it's the same principle. I'd rather just, let the land go for a little bit cheaper and have them do it the way they want it. And also I don't want to be responsible for people like, oh, you put the well in the wrong place, or, the well's not working. They call me back in 6 months. It's just it's not my business.
Right. Now, my next question is, your owner financing these pieces of land. The buyers are bringing the mobile homes. So I'm thinking your owner finances for a long time. Are these long-term investments? Are we talking like 15, 20, 30 years in terms of owner financing, like in terms of cash flow,
So traditionally I have been doing that. I have been doing like 15 or 20 years, but lately I'm so scared of inflation that I'm starting to shorten my notes to like 7. I'm like, I don't want to do 15 years. I'll do 7, I'll do 6, just because, if you're paying me $400 a month, well, 10 years from now, $400 a month might not be enough for, a Subway sandwich. So
right. That's true.
That's kind of my concern. But on the other hand, when you borrow money, that works in your favor, right? Like if you take out a mortgage and your payment is $1,200 a month locked in for 30 years, well, you might be able to work for an hour and make $1,200, in 10 years from now. So because of inflation, I'm trying to shorten them up and get a little more cash because.
Yeah. The market is really doing a somersault right now. So
who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, but it's funny. It's like the market, but like with the housing market, it's completely different. So everyone's like still getting priced out.
Right.
But then you look at, the market, I'm talking about paper assets. It's completely different. So I don't know. I just don't know at this point. My other question is, have you ever had anyone, not the dealership, not like a bank, like, okay, financing you out, but have you had like individuals actually just pay you straight up cash?
It does happen.
The land,
It happens. It's rare, but it happens. I mean, it's rare in my market.
Okay.
I think in some slightly more affluent markets, it might be more common, but
okay.
People do manage to get, I mean, there's land banks here and stuff, and people manage to get, of course I always do that. Whenever someone approaches me for a loan, I always try to pass them off to my banker first.
Right.
To see if they can qualify. And if they can, I just say, all right, well, I'll do it for you,
Okay. And then a lot of these buyers, are they local or are they out of state, or is it a mix?
It's all local. I mean, this is not, Manhattan where people are coming from all over the world. Every now and then, someone will come because it's cheaper. The land's cheaper here, in my understanding, than a lot of places. But it's mostly people local. I'm around a couple big cities that are, an hour, 2 hours away. I'd still call those people local. Maybe they're not, but yeah.
It's funny because the majority of my business is local. I do get those out of state buyers, but they tend to be looky-loos.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to waste my time.
Sure.
And they almost they have a million questions. They can't make a decision versus the locals. They're like, I want to live in this community.
Yeah, right.
My daughter goes to school here. I work here up the street. I want to live here. What do I need to do? I don't care.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure you've noticed this, but like, there is that one type of buyer that you get once in a while who's like, clearly they are fantasizing about some kind of life and they want you to indulge them in their fantasy. They have no intention of buying anything. You got to spot those people right off and just get off the phone. But
Exactly. Well, that's some good information about land investing. I know you are an author, and I did review, and I'll put this in the show notes for anyone listening, your book, The Land Flipper, Turning Dirt into Dollars. I did review as a really good book. Can you tell everyone else about some of your other books? Because I know you have some other books, and then you've also, didn't you have put these into audio format as well too?
Yeah, the main one, which is the one you just mentioned, is in audio. I've always just kind of been interested in writing, and so in this business, we do have downtimes, like in the winter and stuff. So I'll write a book, and I got one that's sort of about owner financing, and it's just I want to tell everyone that these are very broad brush bird's eye views of the topics, but I've got one on owner financing, I've got one on building roads, and I've got one on timberland. And I'm about to release another one here in the next little while that's just going to be more of like it's going to be called, I haven't got the exact title. It's going to be like My Life in 1,000 Flips or something.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really just meant to be more like a conversational, anecdotal. It's meant to be like entertainment as well as informational, like a narrative. So yeah, I'll have 4 or 5 books, and they're all available on Amazon. So
awesome. Yeah. And I'll put a link to all that and his author profile in the show notes for anyone interested, and also the review I did on his book. But I highly recommend his books because I've read them, and they're just very well written as an author myself.
Thank you.
And very easy to understand. So if y'all are listening, if you're interested, like just trying to get a feel for land investing, check out his books. I'll put it in the show notes, in for this podcast episode. But I also wanted to go over, because we went over so much information and it can be overwhelming for people just starting out. I did review Seth's course, Land Flippers, and it's an excellent course. It's very thorough. Yeah, it's very thorough, very easy to understand. He pretty much touches on so much information. And, I did have to do it in stages because it was so thorough and I took a lot of notes on it. So can you tell all the listeners a little bit about your course and what they can learn in it for anyone interested? Yeah.
So the course is meant to be just like about land itself, Okay. I've always thought like, if go to a garage sale, I always use this example. If you went to a garage sale, right, and let's say you were the world's foremost expert on Russian dolls, Russian stacking dolls. You're at this garage sale and you see some sort of antique Russian doll that is worth $20,000 being sold for $5. Just the fact that you're an expert in that one thing, like if you're going to buy and sell and trade something, it pays to be intensely understand that thing. Mm-hmm. So that's what the course is aimed at. It's not necessarily like a business course or anything like that. It's mainly just focused on understanding land as an asset, understanding land as, a commodity that you're going to buy and sell and trade. Okay. Not like as an item on a spreadsheet, and how to like conduct this large. It's very local, like we talked about earlier. So it's all about doing it in your own backyard. That's basically what it's about.
Okay. And for anyone interested, what aspects do you cover so that people know exactly what's involved in the course?
Sure.
In terms of the land business.
Yeah. It's how to buy land, what to look for, mm-hmm. how to develop it a little bit, not in depth, but, how to get it ready for market, how to market it, some of the financial aspects involved, how you might go about getting the money, and just basically walking you through the process that I use.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And does it include, as people are interested, some of the, I guess do you have examples of paperwork that you use in
I
it
usually
and
don't include
all
them in
that?
I don't put them in the course, but people, will email me. The course comes with like a consultation when you're finished with it. So you
Oh,
can,
okay. Good.
yeah. So
Good.
you can call
Yeah.
me for an hour and just pick my brain, or we can talk about what you're working on. And I have all those files. I don't like to put them in the course because I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to be like, here's a contract,
Yeah, it's got to be local. Yeah, well, that's what I
Yeah.
tell people because a lot of these contracts, I mean, they find them and then they present them to me, and I said, well, you can use that as a template to
Sure.
your
Yeah.
attorney, and then have your attorney look it
Right.
over and make sure it complies with the laws in your
Exactly. That's
area.
what I tell people. I don't believe in self-closing or using a contract that you get from some
No,
guru. I mean, you need a local lawyer when it comes to real. It's too big of a
no.
purchase. So
Right. And it does save time to use those templates versus having a lawyer draft up a whole thing
sure.
because their time is, you're paying a
Yeah.
couple $100 an hour for that.
I mean, use the templates. Use the templates all day. Just don't be surprised when you get to a court of law and you're being sued and the judge says, "What the hell is this?" Don't say, "Hey, I got it from EB Farmer."
No, 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 no. I'm the same way too. I don't have my own contracts or any of that, but I tell people where to get example ones
Yeah.
because I
Right.
know exactly, and you probably the same way. I know exactly where to find them.
Yeah.
And then I tell people, then take it to your attorney
Right.
locally
Right.
and then have them look it over.
Yeah, it's a useful
You know,
tool to like educate yourself about what a contract looks like, what the general, things it touches on. Um, and if you wanted to just use it to make a sort of handshake deal and like reinforce the handshake, but then, when you go to close, that all should be done by a title attorney, in my opinion.
Right. And that's something that we hadn't touched about. How does the closing process work? You talked about title attorney. There's also title companies. I mean, how does that work in your area in terms of the closing with the buyer?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I have a few
The
different
seller.
companies that I use, and they do an abstract, they issue, title insurance, and they do all the paperwork, and they have a title attorney working at the office. And so I feel real, secure once you get in. I mean, it costs, $1,000 maybe.
Right, right.
But
right.
I'm buying real estate that's $250,000. I'm willing to pay $1,000 to make sure, because there's stuff that can go wrong. I mean, don't freak yourself out, but read some horror stories about chain of title once in a while, and somebody's great aunt niece comes back from the dead, and she's got partial claim to that property that there's all kind of things that can happen.
Right,
So
right.
I like to sleep at night personally, so I use a lawyer.
I believe
Yeah.
you. I believe you.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about on the buying with the seller. Do you use an attorney on the selling end to the buyer that you're selling as
Both
well
ends.
too?
Both ends.
Okay. And is it the same company or are you using a different company?
I try to use the same company just because they'll often have some of the paperwork already in their file, and that way I tend to use the same. It doesn't always work out that way, but
okay. And then
the buyer has the right technically to engage their own. Like, you're not supposed to be like, "Hey, buyer, you have to use my lawyer." Like, that could be
right.
But I always say, "Here's the person I use if you want to use them," and they usually do so.
Right. Yeah. But the transaction is like you're selling the land. You're actually transferring over the title. It's theirs, but you have the lien, with these owner financing deals.
So usually with my owner financing deals in my specific region, so this is something that's local and it's different in every place.
Right.
But here, a lot of the owner financing is done like deedlessly. So in other words, if I'm selling to you for $1,000 a month, I keep the deed until you pay me off. So it's like you're basically like renting to own.
Okay.
Property. Yeah.
Right.
And now that's different in different places. I think in Texas, in fact, you're not allowed to do that. I've heard.
Right. Yeah. In specific cases, you have to comply with, there's a lot of laws, and I won't get into it because we're not talking about that right now.
Yeah, but
it's different. Yeah.
They're different in different places.
And even area.
Even the language that is used, to refer to these different kinds of structures is different. in different places. So,
and during this time, I mean, if you're doing it that way in your specific region, you hold it until it's paid off. Who's paying the taxes and the insurance? Are they paying it, or how do you know they're paying it, or are you just covering that?
they're supposed to pay all that stuff. It says in the I can't give you the name of the actual document without revealing where I am, but there's a special document. It says they're required to pay the insurance and the taxes. But of course, I follow up on it. I don't want anything with my name on it to go to tax sales. So I,
me neither.
Religiously follow up on all that and make sure it's done.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So now I have a question, because it's very interesting, because I've been told by somebody who actually teaches these classes about buying land that you don't have to put insurance on land. I mean, what is your view on that? I mean, what can go wrong? I mean, I don't know, I mean, what's your view on that?
my advice, it's a very tricky subject, and one that you should discuss with your insurance expert. But I will say that the general consensus that I've gathered from talking to a lot of insurance experts is that you should have a umbrella policy. If you're doing business and you own a lot of raw land, you should have an umbrella liability policy, right? Okay. This is a policy that, if someone goes on a piece of property that you own and they fall in an old well and, they break their leg, maybe this insurance would, pay their medical bills or something like that, or protect you from being sued too badly. Right. There's no telling in America what can happen. But that's just, and then when people buy and you still hold the deed, they're supposed to have their own insurance on it, particularly if they're putting a mobile home and blah, blah, blah. You're not, but see, there's not anything that can damage the land itself. So you're not really.
That was my question. Yeah. The land.
You're not insuring the land. You're not insuring the land.
Okay.
It's just dirt. It'll be there no matter what.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, how does that work? Because this person actually teaches about buying land and selling, and he's like, you don't need to put insurance on the land. So that's very interesting. And then my next question is, how do you find these companies? Are they specific companies that work with what you do? Or is it just any like title company or title attorney, or is it local to your area? Like, how
it's got to be local. It absolutely has to be local. But I mean, they deal with everything from like chattel, which I guess like is mobile home, what we call it chattel here, like movable property, like cars and mobile homes and stuff, all the way to, $1 million homes and to anything that's got a title attached to it. They would deal with. But they need to be as local as possible in order to navigate the specific rules and regulations that, exist wherever you are.
Okay. Well, I guess the theme of today's podcast is local.
That's great. I mean, that's a lot
we're both on the same page with that.
A lot of people, a lot of gurus and people, they swear by the remote stuff, and the remote stuff does work. But it's definitely not what I'd be comfortable with. It's out of my comfort zone. Yeah.
I have a friend who's all about turnkey. She lives in California. She buys out of state, but I'm just not.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely works for some people, and it does. But what I like to think of what I do is like kind of a bespoke, like I'm a boutique. I'm not a Walmart. I'm selling. And
I don't like to fly to all these places, because she's doing that. She's like, I was in the Midwest and now I'm on the East Coast. I mean, it's crazy.
At least she's going there and seeing it. I mean, I know a lot of remote investors that never set foot on their property, which is a little weird to me, but it's a modern world now, and you can do everything just with clicking. So,
Exactly. And that's why we're having this podcast interview right now.
Right, exactly.
Because I'm not where you're at and you're not where I'm at, obviously. Okay, great. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add, Seth, about, land investing? Any advice for people who just are starting out looking into it, for the folks out there listening? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really give any things super specific just because there's so many different ways of doing it and going about it. Right. But from a broader brush, I would say that an entrepreneur's life is often sort of governed by fear or lack thereof. And so that when if you're ever, this applies to any business, it's not just land, but like if you're getting started and like say you're going to quit your job and like become an entrepreneur and you're going to take this big risk, it becomes really all about managing your fear. So try not to let the absolute terror you feel overwhelm you, and try to be brave because, fortune favors the bold, as they say.
Good. Yes, so, I agree. I agree. Sweaty palms and all. That was me. We've all been there. That's
what stops a lot of people. That's what, and it stops me even as like a successful entrepreneur. I get scared and I have to remind myself like fear is the center thing in the middle. It's the game itself. You have to be able to control and manage that fear if you want the reward. You got to risk it for the biscuit. So I'm not telling you.
I love that. I love that. Risk it for the biscuit. Okay.
I'm not telling you to, put your whole paycheck on black or whatever. I'm just saying that that fear you feel is often an indication that you're actually doing something amazing and you're headed in the right direction, and harness that fear and learn to make good use of it, because it can be a motivating factor. So yeah.
That's some great advice. Great advice. Face your fears, y'all. Face your fears. That's why I did this podcast.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Seth. This is all good information. For anyone listening, I'm going to put all the links to everything in the show notes, Seth's books, my course review on his course on land investing, my review on his book as well too. Seth, for those out there who want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach you? Do you have a website? How would they reach you?
Sure. There's a Facebook group, The Land Flipper. There's a website, The Land Flipper, and another website where the course is, that's just landflippers.com. If you want to email me, the easiest way is just thelandflipper@gmail.com, as unprofessional as that sounds. I have a professional email address, but like I hardly ever check it. So just email me to the casual one and we can have a conversation.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for coming on to the show and actually sharing your time and your knowledge with everyone, all the listeners out there. Thank you so much, Seth. And
thank you, Rachel. I appreciate what you do.
I really appreciate this. Exactly. I will catch you all on the next episode. This is Rachel Hernandez, aka Mobile Home Girl of AdventuresOfMobileHomes.com, signing off. Bye.